The reason that we're here talking is because there's been a lot of coverage about Kleiner in the past year, and not all of it positive. You've been involved in venture now for 16 plus years. What's your view on what's been going on at Kleiner?
Venture is a long-term business. It's not a business you measure quarterly. It's not even a business that you measure annually. And there is no doubt about it that any venture firm has some big years and has some not as big years. And we are susceptible to that as anybody. This is why when we have long-term LPs, it's a very good perspective on things. They're nonplussed by an off year. That's life. We're not going to get every venture. You know, we know that. We're not going to be an investor in every great venture. Bothers us when we're not, but it's not. The reality is that's not going to happen. We'll miss some. That's okay.
And you told me that it's okay too at what stage you invest in them. Like there was a lot of criticism that you missed some early deals, but I think your line to me was, as long as we're in.
What we try and do is evaluate the price at which we're entering. Can we generate the kinds of returns that our limited partners would want us to generate? Sometimes, most of the time, it's early, because that's most of what we do, but sometimes it might be later on. It's actually why we created the Digital Growth Fund with Mary Meeker and team, is to make sure we get a chance for those opportunities and invest in those. And I think that's great. I think it's part of the investing spectrum.
You had gone to an approach where deals were looked at by
practice groups.
Yeah. Thank you. But that has now gone back to the entire partnership. So can you talk about that?
Now we're back to doing it as one group regardless of what sector, whether it be life science, green, or digital. And it's the concept that every venture is fighting for the same dollars and held to the same standards. And I think that's right, and it's good. And the other way served us well for a period of time, and now we're back to doing it in this manner.
It was described to me by Mike, by Chiwa, by Megan Quinn, a generational shift here at Kleiner. Why don't you talk about what that generational shift was, what it means?
Venture firms, to me, are always in a constant state of generational change. Venture, by its very nature, is a mentorship business, meaning that a more experienced investor works with a more junior investor and grooms them. You're going to be molding all along. So we're in one of those molding periods where there's some new faces, but there's some old faces, and there's going to be that constant mentoring that's going to go on. And it's persisted. It's how I was brought up.
A lot of your partners mentioned Dragnet. Megan Quinn mentioned the social media noise around companies and people. What are some of the other things that you started tracking? And that's, again, very recently.
There's over, I think, 10 different data sources that we bring into Dragnet that we go through and we parse, and it generates some pretty interesting reports that we look at. It's a scientific approach, a more scientific approach, to figuring out where to spend our time, what's hot, what's not, how it's trending, and how to deploy your resources. And if you do that properly, we're seeing the results of that. Our sourcing capabilities have probably gone up 50% year over year. We saw 10 times more companies this past year than we did the previous year. I think that's all good, and I think that's all part of that competitive change. It's part of opening an office in San Francisco to be more competitive. It is the part of hiring people like a Megan Quinn and a Ray Bradford, have the younger generation in their blood, and they're out seeing people on an ongoing basis. So I think that's all part of changing, but changing to be, I think, more competitive as you need to be in the industry today.
Last summer, Kleiner's partners came together collectively to discuss what the values of this firm are. What were some of those values?
It was an important, I think, exercise for the team to come together and align around what we thought was important and what's also not important. The culture of the partnership and those values really didn't change much from how we've operated over all these different years. And it's things like, you know what, your family is first. It works out great. You're in a meeting and somebody says, you know what, I have to go pick up my kid at school. No issues.
There's a lot of buzz about venture firms offering services and perhaps as this new kind of trend, but that's not the takeaway that I got very clearly from people here, that it's not new.
The service-oriented approach has been our approach for years. I mean, with the hiring 10 years ago of Juliette de Bobigny to pioneer recruiting as a service for the entrepreneur, we've probably put 100 board members in place. We've recruited over 150 CEOs. I think in excess of 600 executives, placed about 300 engineers in companies. So it's very tangible, very helpful to our entrepreneurs. But then we've added services. We've added a Christina Lee, in marketing communications and PR to help our entrepreneurs. We've added Lila Ibrahim, who works on business development on behalf of the companies. There's a whole series of ways that we just continue to innovate in this area, and I think continues to differentiate us.
There seems to be this feeling about being more open, more out there, more visible among the entrepreneurial community, and that.
I think in general the venture industry is doing that. I think there's a broader reach out. Look, we used to do many of these things on a different level, and I think we're ratcheting it up and we're doing more of it, and I think it's paying off.